Girl cooks with tin can and sticks. Michelin chef invites her to cook in his fine dining restaurant. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The smoke rose gently from the tin can nestled between two bricks. Underneath, dry twigs crackled as they fed the tiny flame. Little Giselle, just 10 years old, stirred a thin porridge with a stick she had scrubbed clean. Her small fingers were red from the cold, her sleeves frayed, her shoes mismatched and full of holes. And yet, her eyes remained focused, not on what she lacked, but on getting the proportions just right. She was making dinner for her younger siblings, just like every night since their mother had fallen ill. The porridge smelled of hope, even if it tasted of almost nothing. She didn't know she was being watched. Winter in Chicago was particularly cruel that year. The winds that swept off Lake Michigan seemed to find every crack in the walls of the abandoned apartment building where Giselle and her family had taken refuge. What had once been a temporary shelter during their mother's illness had become home for nearly 6 months now. The building stood in stark contrast to the gleaming towers of downtown, visible in the distance, a forgotten island in a sea of prosperity. Giselle hunched over her makeshift stove, her breath visible in the cold air. Her siblings, twins Harley and Hope, only 7 years old, huddled together under a thin blanket nearby, watching her with wide, trusting eyes. Their faces had grown thinner over the weeks, but Giselle made sure they always ate, even when it meant going hungry herself. "Is it almost ready, Gissie?" Harley asked, his voice small but eager. "Almost," Giselle promised, managing a smile. "Today we have something special." The something special was half an onion she'd found behind the grocery store, still firm, enough to use. She'd diced it carefully with a dull pocket knife and added it to their usual mix of oats and water. The tiny addition would transform their bland meal into something approaching flavorful. From the corner where a mattress lay on the floor, a weak cough sounded. Their mother, Nancy, was having one of her better days, sitting up against the wall, her eyes following Giselle's movements with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. "You shouldn't have to do this," Nancy whispered, her voice raspy from the persistent cough that had taken her job, their apartment, and their stability. "It's okay, Mom," Giselle replied, the lie coming easily now after months of practice. "I like cooking," and it wasn't entirely untrue. Even in these desperate circumstances, Giselle had discovered something profound in the act of creating nourishment from next to nothing. There was magic in transforming scraps into something that could sustain life. She'd learned to identify which dumpsters behind which restaurants might yield usable ingredients. She knew exactly how long to soak dried beans found in a forgotten pantry box to make them edible again. She had memorized which wild plants growing in nearby lots were safe to eat. As she stirred the porridge, adding a pinch of salt salvaged from fast food packets, Giselle didn't hear the approaching footsteps until they were nearly upon her. Her body tensed, ready to gather her siblings and run if necessary. Life on the margins had taught her wariness of strangers. That's when she noticed him, a tall man in an expensive-looking coat, watching her from beyond the crumbling wall that separated their hideaway from the alley. His expression wasn't threatening but curious. Still, Giselle shifted her body to block her siblings from view. "Hello there," the man said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent. "That smells interesting." Giselle didn't respond, her hand tightening around the stick she used as a spoon. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all she had. The man seemed to sense her fear and stayed where he was, making no move to come closer. "My name is Nicholas. I'm a chef." He gestured toward the tin can. "May I ask what you're making?" Suspicion fought with an unexpected desire to share her creation with someone who might understand. After a moment's hesitation, Giselle answered, "Porridge, with onion." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully, as if she'd said something profound. "The simplest dishes often tell the most truthful stories," he said. "May I?" He pointed to the mixture. Against her better judgment, Giselle dipped her makeshift spoon into the porridge and extended it toward him. Nicholas approached slowly, took the offered spoon and tasted. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again they held something Giselle couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "You have a gift," he said simply. Giselle almost laughed, A gift for making gruel in a tin can seemed like the most useless talent in the world, yet the sincerity in the man's eyes stopped her. "Where did you learn to cook?" he asked. "Nowhere," Giselle shrugged. "Mom used to cook before." She trailed off, glancing back at her mother. "Now I just figure it out." Nicholas was quiet for a moment, studying her. "How would you like to cook in a real kitchen?" Before Giselle could respond, her mother called out, voice tight with fear. "Giselle, who are you talking to?" Nicholas straightened and approached the opening in the wall that led to their living space. He introduced himself to Nancy, who regarded him with suspicion mingled with embarrassment at being found in such circumstances. "Your daughter has remarkable intuition," Nicholas explained. "I own a restaurant downtown, Augustine's. Perhaps you've heard of it?" Nancy's eyes widened slightly. Even in their isolation, the name was familiar, one of Chicago's most celebrated restaurants, the kind of place they would have walked past but never entered, even in better times. "I'd like to offer Giselle an opportunity," Nicholas continued. "A proper job in my kitchen, with training and a salary." The words hung in the air like impossible things, beautiful but untrustworthy. "Why?" Nancy asked, the single word containing volumes of justified suspicion. Nicholas glanced at Giselle, who was now serving porridge to her siblings with careful precision, ensuring each got exactly the same amount. "Because talent shouldn't be wasted," he said simply, "and because I recognize something in her that can't be taught." As the conversation continued, Giselle only half listened, focused on feeding her family. But inside, something flickered to life. A tiny flame of possibility that, like her makeshift stove, might just be enough to provide warmth against the relentless Chicago winter. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe. For more videos like this, if not, type 0, it helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Nicholas returned the next day, this time with a large paper bag that emitted enticing aromas. He'd brought food, real food, warm and abundant. The twins fell upon it with barely restrained desperation, while Nancy watched with tears in her eyes, too proud to eat until her children had their fill. Giselle, however, approached her portion with methodical curiosity. She examined each item before tasting: the perfectly roasted chicken, the creamy risotto, the buttery vegetables. She sniffed, took small bites, and seemed to be memorizing the experience with all her senses. "What herbs are in this?" she asked Nicholas, pointing to the risotto. He smiled. "Thyme, primarily, some sage, a touch of rosemary." Giselle nodded, filing away the information. "And what makes it so smooth?" "Patience," Nicholas replied. "Stock added slowly, constant stirring, butter and parmesan at the end." Their conversation continued this way through the meal, with Giselle asking precise questions that surprised Nicholas with their insight. This was no ordinary curiosity, he realized. This was the mind of someone who understood food on an instinctive level. After they finished eating, Nicholas laid out his proposal in more detail. Giselle would come to Augustine's 3 days a week after school. She would start by observing, learning basic skills, and helping with simple preparations. As she progressed, her responsibilities would increase. She would be paid fairly for her time. "And what about my family?" Giselle asked, her young face suddenly stern. "I need to take care of them." Nicholas had anticipated this. "I've arranged for your mother to see a specialist at Northwestern Memorial," he said, addressing Nancy directly. "At no cost to you. The doctor is an old friend who owes me a favor." Nancy's face flushed. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Nicholas countered gently. "It's an investment in Giselle's future. She can't focus on learning if she's worried about you." The negotiation that followed was tense, with pride warring against practicality. In the end, a compromise was reached. Nancy would accept medical help and temporary housing assistance, but insisted on finding work as soon as she was able. Giselle would start at Augustine's, but only if her schoolwork wouldn't suffer. 2 days later, Giselle stood at the employee entrance of Augustine's, her heart hammering in her chest. She wore clean clothes provided by Nicholas. Not a uniform yet, but presentable attire that wouldn't stand out among the staff. Her hands, scrubbed pink, still bore the calluses from months of survival living. The door opened to reveal a woman. In chef's whites, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. "You must be Giselle," she said, her expression unreadable. "I'm Chef Olivia, the sous chef. Nicholas asked me to show you around." Giselle nodded silently, suddenly unable to find her voice. The kitchen that greeted her was nothing like she had imagined. It was a gleaming world of stainless steel and purpose, every surface immaculate, every tool in its designated place. The air was thick with a symphony of aromas, reducing stocks, baking bread, searing meats. Chefs moved with practiced precision in what seemed like a choreographed dance, calling out terms Giselle didn't understand. "Firing table 7, 2 minutes on the scallops. Behind you, hot pan." It was overwhelming, terrifying, and absolutely exhilarating. Olivia led her through the space, explaining each station as they passed. Garde-manger handles cold preparations, salads, appetizers. The hot line is for main courses. Pastry has its own section in the back. Giselle absorbed everything with wide eyes, trying to memorize the layout, the equipment, the rhythm of the kitchen. When they reached the dish pit, where a young man was efficiently cleaning stacks of plates, Olivia stopped. "You'll start here," she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. Everyone does, even Nicholas when he was training. Learn the dishes, learn respect for the equipment, prove you can be trusted with the basics. If Olivia expected disappointment or protest, she was surprised. Giselle simply nodded and asked, "When do I start?" "Now," Olivia replied, handing her an apron. "Nicholas may see something in you, but in this kitchen, you earn your place." The next 4 hours were a blur of soap suds, scalding water, and endless dishes. Giselle's back ached, her feet throbbed, and her hands grew wrinkled from constant immersion. Yet she worked without complaint, quickly learning the most efficient methods for handling the various items that came her way. Occasionally, she would glance up at the cooks working nearby, studying their techniques when they thought no one was watching. She noted how one chef tested pasta by throwing a strand against the wall, how another used the back of a spoon to create a perfect quenelle of sorbet, how a third judged doneness in meat by pressing it with a finger. By the end of her shift, Giselle was exhausted but fulfilled in a way she hadn't experienced before. As she hung up her apron, Nicholas appeared beside her. "Well?" he asked. "Still interested?" Giselle looked him directly in the eyes. "When can I come back?" Nicholas smiled. "Tomorrow, 4 o'clock." As Giselle left Augustine's that evening, the weight of responsibility still heavy on her young shoulders, something else accompanied it now. A sense of possibility, as nourishing in its way as the staff meal she'd been invited to share before, heading home. What Giselle couldn't know was how much her presence had already disturbed the delicate ecosystem of Augustine's kitchen. In the office behind the wine cellar, Olivia confronted Nicholas as soon as Giselle was gone. "A child." "Nicholas, really? We're running a Michelin-starred restaurant, not a daycare." Nicholas leaned back in his chair, unfazed by her irritation. "She has something special, Liv. Something raw and untrained, but remarkable. Give her a chance." "It's not about chances," Olivia argued. "It's about standards, about the reputation we've spent years building, about the team we already have who've earned their positions." "And none of that will change," Nicholas assured her. "But sometimes, Olivia, talent appears in unexpected places. We'd be fools to ignore it, because it doesn't fit our preconceptions." Olivia's expression remained skeptical, but she knew better than to press further. In the decade they'd worked together, she'd learned to trust Nicholas's instincts about people, even when they seemed irrational. Still, as she returned to the kitchen to oversee dinner prep, a knot of unease settled in. Her stomach. Change was coming to Augustine's, and she wasn't convinced it would be for the better. What none of them realized was just how profound that change would be, and how it would transform not just Giselle's life, but all of theirs in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. The weeks that followed established a grueling new routine for Giselle. School during the day, Augustine's in the evening, homework late at night. The temporary housing Nicholas had arranged was modest but clean, with reliable heating and running water, luxuries that still felt foreign after months of hardship. Her mother's health improved steadily under proper medical care, though the road to full recovery would be long. At Augustine's, Giselle moved from dishwashing to basic prep work, proving her worth through meticulous attention to detail. She peeled hundreds of potatoes, chopped mountains of vegetables, and learned the foundational skills that underpin fine cuisine. Her hands, once red from cold and rough work, now bore the professional burns and cuts of a kitchen apprentice, badges of honor she displayed proudly. Not everyone welcomed her presence. Some of the line cooks viewed her with suspicion, seeing her as Nicholas's charity project, rather than a legitimate member of the team. Others simply ignored her, too focused on their own responsibilities to notice the quiet girl observing their every move. But what these doubters failed to recognize was Giselle's extraordinary capacity for learning. She absorbed techniques like a sponge, often mastering skills after seeing them demonstrated just once. Her memory for recipes and methods was nearly photographic, and her palate, despite her young age and limited exposure to fine cuisine, was remarkably sensitive. One evening, as service wound down and the kitchen staff engaged in their nightly cleaning ritual, Giselle noticed something unusual. Pete, one of the line cooks responsible for the fish station, was hurriedly preparing a sauce that hadn't been on the menu. Curious, she edged closer while wiping down a nearby counter. "What is that?" she asked, indicating the amber liquid reducing in a small saucepan. Pete glanced up, annoyed at being observed. "Nothing. Just testing something." But Giselle's nose told her otherwise. The aroma was complex: citrus, butter, herbs, and something else she couldn't quite identify. She watched as Pete carefully strained the sauce into a small container, and tucked it into his bag, rather than the walk-in refrigerator where prep for the next day was stored. The next evening, while retrieving vegetables from the cooler, Giselle overheard a heated conversation between Nicholas and a regular customer, a food critic known for his influence in Chicago's dining scene. "The sauce was extraordinary," the critic was saying. "Reminiscent of your early work at Ciel in Paris, but with a distinctive twist. Quite a return to form." Nicholas looked genuinely confused. Which dish was this on? The branzino, of course. The citrus beurre blanc. With that hint of, what was it, tarragon and perhaps star anise? Brilliant combination. Giselle froze, connecting the dots. The branzino was Pete's station. The sauce she'd seen him making after hours must have been served to this critic without Nicholas's knowledge. She should have said nothing. It wasn't her place to interfere in kitchen politics, especially as the newest and most junior member of the team. But something about the deception struck her as fundamentally wrong. Augustine's kitchen operated on trust and collaboration. At least that's what Nicholas had explained during her orientation. That night, after most of the staff had left, Giselle approached Nicholas in his office. Her hands trembled slightly as she explained what she'd seen and heard. Nicholas listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. When she finished, he thanked her quietly and assured her she'd done the right thing. The following day, Pete was gone. No explanation was given to the staff, but the atmosphere in the kitchen was tense, with whispered conversations that ceased whenever Giselle approached. 3 days later, Olivia appeared at Giselle's prep station with an unexpected pronouncement. "Nicholas wants you on fish station tonight. Observing only." Giselle's heart leaped. The fish station was one of the most challenging positions in the kitchen, requiring perfect timing and technique. To even observe, there was a significant promotion from her usual vegetable prep duties. "Are you sure?" she asked, unable to hide her excitement. "No," Olivia replied frankly. "I think it's too soon. But Nicholas insists, and it's his kitchen." She fixed Giselle with a stern look. "Don't make me regret this." That night, Giselle stood beside Jason, the cook who had taken over the fish station, watching his every move with rapt attention. The precision of his knife work, the exact timing of each piece of fish hitting the pan, the careful construction of each plate. It was like watching a master artist at work. During a rare lull in service, Jason glanced at her. "You reported Pete, didn't you?" Giselle tensed, uncertain how to respond. Jason nodded, taking her silence as confirmation. "Good. He was stealing. Not just recipes, but Nicholas's reputation. He demonstrated a technique for checking fish doneness, pressing gently on the flesh. See? It should give just slightly like this. Try. Tentatively, Giselle mimicked his action, surprised when he nodded in approval. You've got good hands, he said. Steady. That matters more than strength in this job. It was the first genuine compliment she'd received from anyone in the kitchen besides Nicholas, and it warmed her more than she expected. What Giselle didn't know was that this interaction was being closely observed by both Nicholas and Olivia from the pass, where completed dishes were inspected before being taken to diners. She has a natural feel for it, Nicholas murmured. Watch how she mirrors his movements without being told. Olivia's expression remained skeptical, but even she couldn't deny what they were seeing. She's still a child, Nicholas. This life, our life, it's punishing. Long hours, constant pressure, sacrificing everything for perfection that few people even appreciate. Is that what you want for her? Nicholas considered this, his gaze still fixed on Giselle. I want her to have choices, he finally replied. The kind of choices that talent like hers deserves. What she does with them will be up to her. Will Jason become Giselle's mentor in the kitchen? Will Olivia ever fully accept this young newcomer into their culinary world? And what hidden talents might Giselle reveal as she gains confidence in Augustine's prestigious kitchen? The journey of this remarkable young chef is just beginning. As spring arrived in Chicago, subtle transformations occurred both in the city and within Augustine's kitchen. New seasonal ingredients appeared daily, inspiring creative additions to the menu. For Giselle, now approaching her 11th birthday, the changes were equally profound. Her responsibility had gradually increased from mere observation to active participation, primarily at the garde-manger station, where she assembled cold appetizers and salads. The twins were thriving in their new school, making friends and regaining the carefree spirit of childhood that had been temporarily suspended during their hardest times. Nancy had begun part-time work as a receptionist at a medical office, arranged through one of Nicholas's connections, though she was determined to earn the position on her own merit. One Tuesday afternoon, Giselle arrived at Augustine's to find the kitchen in an unusual state of chaos. Delivery crates were stacked haphazardly near the walk-in coolers, and staff members rushed about with more urgency than normal. What's happening? She asked Remy, a friendly pastry assistant who had taken her under his wing. Nicholas just got word that the James Beard Foundation is sending representatives tonight, Remy explained, piping delicate chocolate decorations onto silicone mats. Unannounced visit. Could be for award consideration. Giselle understood enough about the culinary world now to recognize the significance. The James Beard Awards were the Oscars of the restaurant industry, and recognition could elevate Augustine's to an entirely new level of prestige. Is there anything I can do to help? She offered. Remy gestured toward a flat of tiny spring vegetables, baby carrots, radishes, and turnips no larger than a fingertip. Those need to be cleaned and prepped. For the spring vegetable mosaic, Olivia swamped with the sauce preparations. Giselle nodded and set to work, handling the delicate produce with the care it deserved. As she worked, she noticed Nicholas in conversation with Olivia and Jason, their expressions tense. From snippets she overheard, it seemed one of their seafood deliveries had been compromised. The scallops, centerpiece of one of Nicholas's signature dishes, had arrived in subpar condition. We'll have to substitute the halibut, Nicholas was saying. Adjust the accompanying elements to compensate. The halibut presentation isn't as dramatic, Olivia argued. Not for a night like this. It's what we have, Nicholas replied firmly. Quality over theatrics, always. Giselle continued working, but her mind was racing. She'd been researching traditional cooking methods in her limited free time, fascinated by techniques that predated modern kitchen equipment. Just last week she'd read about salt crusting, an ancient method for intensifying flavor while maintaining moisture. Before she could second-guess herself, Giselle approached the group. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. "What about salt crusting the halibut?" 3 pairs of eyes turned to her with varying degrees of surprise. "Salt crusting is for whole fish," Jason said dismissively. We're serving individual portions. Not necessarily, Giselle persisted, her confidence growing as she explained. We could prepare individual salt domes for each portion. The presentation would be even more dramatic than the scallop dish. The servers could crack them open tableside. Nicholas tilted his head, considering. The salt would have to be seasoned correctly to properly flavor the fish, without overwhelming it. Herbs from the garden, Giselle suggested. Lemon zest, maybe a little dried seaweed for an ocean essence. A smile slowly spread across Nicholas's face. Olivia, what do you think? The sous chef's brow furrowed as she mentally calculated. Timing, resources, and execution. It's risky, she finally said, but if it works... She nodded once decisively. Let's test it, now. The next hour was a whirlwind as they refined the technique. The first attempt produced fish that was too salty, the second not cooked evenly. By the third version, with adjustments to the salt mixture and cooking time, they achieved perfection. Tender, moist halibut infused with subtle herbal notes, encased in a striking salt dome that released a fragrant steam when cracked. Nicholas placed a hand on Giselle's shoulder. This is going on the menu tonight, he said, pride evident in his voice. Your creation. Our creation, Giselle corrected, glancing at Olivia and Jason. Unwilling to take credit for what had been a collaborative effort, that night's service was a masterclass in precision and excellence. From the kitchen, Giselle watched as the salt-crusted halibut was presented to the James Beard representatives, who reacted with undisguised delight as their server cracked open the aromatic domes. She felt a surge of pride unlike anything she'd experienced before. Not just personal satisfaction, but the pride of contributing to a team's success. After service, Nicholas gathered the staff for a rare post-shift address. Whatever comes. Of tonight's visit, he told them, you should all be proud. You demonstrated what Augustine's truly stands for. Innovation rooted in tradition, excellence in execution, and the ability to transform challenges into opportunities. His gaze found Giselle. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected sources. Remember to listen for them. Later, as Giselle prepared to leave, Olivia approached her. The sous chef's usual stern expression was replaced by something more thoughtful. That was quick thinking today, she said. Creative, practical. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. I misjudged you. Coming from Olivia, this was equivalent to effusive praise. Giselle smiled, sensing a shift in their relationship. Thank you for giving it a chance, she replied. For giving me a chance. Olivia nodded once, then added, be here early tomorrow. We're going to start your formal knife skills training. As Giselle walked home that night, her steps were lighter despite her physical exhaustion. For the first time since joining Augustine's, she felt like she truly belonged, not as Nicholas's project, but as a valuable member of the culinary team. What had begun as an opportunity born of desperation was evolving into something she hadn't dared hope for, a future with purpose. Yet even as doors began to open for Giselle in the rarefied world of fine dining, new challenges were forming on the horizon, challenges that would test not only her growing culinary skills, but also her sense of identity and belonging in ways she couldn't begin to anticipate. Have you ever felt caught between two worlds, trying to balance your responsibilities to your family with the pursuit of your own dreams? Share your experience in the comments below. Summer arrived, bringing with it sweltering heat that transformed Chicago's neighborhoods. In the kitchen at Augustine's, additional fans were positioned strategically to supplement the straining air conditioning system. The menu shifted to lighter fare, chilled soups, vibrant salads, and dishes that showcased the abundance of local summer produce. For Giselle, now working at Augustine's 5 days a week during school break, the change of seasons brought new responsibilities and challenges. Her knife skills had progressed from acceptable to impressive under Olivia's exacting tutelage. She'd graduated from the garde-manger station to occasionally assisting on the hotline during slower weekday services. More significantly, Nicholas had begun including her in menu development sessions, not as a contributor yet, but as an observer and occasional taster. These meetings, held every Monday morning before service preparations began, were where the creative direction of Augustine's took shape. For Giselle, they were masterclasses in culinary thinking, opportunities to understand how Nicholas and his senior team balanced innovation with customer expectations, seasonal availability with technique and artistic expression with financial reality. On this particular Monday, the discussions centered around an upcoming charity gala, where Augustine's would prepare the main course for 300 guests. The challenge, Nicholas explained to the assembled chefs, is creating something that maintains our standards while being executable at scale, transportable to the venue, and appealing to a broad audience. Various suggestions were offered and debated. A sous vide preparation for consistency, a composed plate that could be partially assembled in advance, a summer interpretation of a classic French dish. Giselle listened attentively, mentally evaluating each proposal against the criteria Nicholas had outlined. When a lull occurred in the conversation, she found herself speaking up. "What about something inspired by home cooking but elevated?" she suggested. "Everyone connects with food that reminds them of comfort, regardless of their culinary background." The senior chefs exchanged glances, some curious, others dismissive. "Go on," Nicholas encouraged. Giselle's mind raced back to her grandmother's, cooking simple but flavorful dishes made with whatever was available. A braised short rib, perhaps, cooked low and slow with summer vegetables. It can be prepared in advance, actually improves with time, and can be portioned consistently. For service, it could be glazed with a reduction of the braising liquid and garnished with fresh, bright elements for contrast. Nicholas considered this, nodding slowly. Familiar but refined, hearty yet suitable for summer with the right accompaniments. He looked around the table. "Let's develop this concept further. Olivia, work with Giselle on a test run for tomorrow's tasting." As the meeting dispersed, Olivia approached Giselle with an expression that mixed surprise with something like respect. "Good concept," she acknowledged. "Now comes the hard part, execution. Be prepared to defend every element when we present it tomorrow." The next 24 hours were a blur of experimentation and refinement. Giselle and Olivia tested different cuts of beef, various braising liquids, cooking times, and accompaniments. They argued constructively about flavor profiles and presentation, pushing each other toward excellence. When they finally presented their collaboration to Nicholas the following afternoon, the result was a perfect synthesis of home-style comfort and fine dining finesse. Red wine-braised short ribs with a sweet corn puree, charred summer vegetables, and a bright gremolata that cut through the richness of the meat. Nicholas tasted in contemplative silence, then smiled. "This is it," he said simply. "The essence of what we're trying to achieve, sophisticated without being pretentious, comforting without being commonplace." As preparations for the gala continued over the subsequent weeks, Giselle found herself in an increasingly prominent role. The short rib dish, now officially named Heritage Braised Beef on Augustine's documents, was her first significant contribution to the restaurant's repertoire. The pride she felt was complicated by an unexpected conflict that arose at home. "You're never here anymore," Hope complained one evening when Giselle returned late from the restaurant. "You promised to help with my science project." Guilt washed over Giselle. In her growing immersion in Augustine's world, she'd begun to neglect the family responsibilities that had once defined her existence. "I'm sorry," she said, sitting beside her sister on the small couch in their apartment. "I lost track of time. We can work on it now." Hope shook her head. "Mom already helped me. She said you have important work to do." The words stung more than they should have. Yes, her work at Augustine's was important, both for her future and for their financial stability. But nothing was more important than her family. Wasn't that why she'd started cooking in the first place? To care for those she loved? Later that night, Giselle found her mother sitting alone at their kitchen table, reviewing bills by the dim light of a table lamp. "Are the kids okay?" Giselle asked, her voice small. "Am I letting them down?" Nancy looked up, her face softening. "They're proud of you, Giselle. We all are. They just miss you." "I miss them too," Giselle admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled in two different directions." Her mother reached across the table to take her hand. That's part of growing up, sweetie. Finding balance, you're just doing it sooner than most. What if I can't? What if I have to choose? Nancy squeezed her hand. You're thinking in false alternatives. It doesn't have to be either your family or your talent. The challenge is honoring both. These words echoed in Giselle's mind throughout the next day as she worked alongside the Augustines team, prepping components for the gala. The kitchen was a hive of coordinated activity, with each chef focused on their specific tasks. Despite the pressure, there was a camaraderie that reminded Giselle, in its own way, of family. As she meticulously trimmed short ribs, Nicholas appeared beside her, observing her technique with approval. You seem preoccupied today, he noted. Giselle hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm trying to figure out how to balance everything. My work here, my family, school starting again soon. Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. The restaurant life isn't easy on families, he acknowledged. Many chefs sacrifice personal lives for their careers. I did for many years. He paused, selecting his words carefully. But it doesn't have to be that way. The key is boundaries, clear ones, consistently maintained. How do you do that? Giselle asked. By remembering why you cook in the first place, Nicholas replied. For me, it was never about acclaim or awards. It was about creating moments of genuine connection through food. He gestured around the kitchen. All of this, the technique, the precision, the artistry, it's in service of that connection. If you lose sight of that, no amount of professional success will satisfy. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of delivery trucks at the loading dock, but Nicholas's words lingered with Giselle throughout the day. By the time she headed home that evening, she had made a decision. She would establish clearer boundaries, including designated family nights when nothing, not even Augustine's, would take priority. What she couldn't know was how soon those boundaries would be tested. The charity gala, scheduled for the following weekend, had unexpectedly gained prominence when news broke that the governor would be attending, along with several prominent national food critics. This isn't just about supporting the children's hospital anymore, Olivia explained during the final planning meeting. It's become a showcase. All eyes will be on Augustine's contribution. Nicholas nodded, his expression serious. We proceed, as planned, but with absolute precision. No room for error. His gaze swept across the team before landing on Giselle, especially with our featured dish. The responsibility pressed heavily on Giselle's shoulders. This was her concept, her chance to prove herself on a larger stage. Yet it was also the weekend she had promised to attend Harley's baseball tournament, his first as a starting player. That evening she approached Nicholas in his office, heart pounding. I need to ask something important, she began hesitantly. Harley's baseball tournament is Saturday morning. I promised I'd be there. Is there any way I could join the gala? Prep team afternoon. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, studying her with an unreadable expression. The team begins prep at 6 a.m. Your dish is the centerpiece. He paused and Giselle's heart sank. But your presence at the venue itself isn't required until 2 p.m. Make sure Jason and Olivia have everything they need before you go. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. I'll make absolutely sure everything is perfect. I know you will, Nicholas replied with a small smile. That's why I'm not worried. Saturday arrived with perfect blue skies, ideal weather for both baseball and the outdoor portion of the charity gala. Giselle woke before dawn, arriving at Augustine's kitchen by 5:30 a.m. For the next 4 hours, she worked alongside the team, preparing components for 300 portions of heritage braised beef. The short ribs, already perfectly braised, the day before were portioned and ready for reheating. The vegetable garnishes were prepped for last-minute charring. The corn puree was prepared to the exact consistency that would hold properly during service. At precisely 10:15, Giselle stepped back from her station. Everything's prepped according to specifications, she reported to Olivia, who inspected her work with critical eyes. Acceptable, Olivia confirmed, which from her was high praise. The team will transport everything to the venue at noon. Be there by 2 to supervise final assembly. I will, Giselle promised, already untying her apron. Thank you. She raced to the baseball field, arriving just as Harley's team took their positions for the first inning. The look of joy on her brother's face when he spotted her in the stands was worth every exhausting moment of her early morning work. Nancy and Hope were already there, saving her a seat. "You made it," Nancy said, surprised. "I thought you'd be stuck with gala preparations all day." "Nicholas arranged it," Giselle explained, eyes fixed on Harley as he nervously took his position at second base. He understood this was important. The game was a childhood masterpiece of missed catches, occasional hits, and boundless enthusiasm. Harley managed a solid single in his second at-bat, and his team won by a single run in the final inning. Giselle cheered until her voice grew hoarse, momentarily setting aside thoughts of the culinary challenge awaiting her. As the team celebrated, Giselle checked her watch. 1:30, still time to make it to the gala venue by 2. She hugged Harley tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she told him. "Save me a trophy cookie, okay? I have to get back to work." His face fell slightly, but he nodded in understanding. "Will you tell me all about the fancy party later?" "Every detail," she promised, already gathering her things. Nancy drove her to the lakefront pavilion where the gala was being held, dropping her at the service entrance. "Knock them dead, chef," her mother said with a wink, using the title that still felt foreign to Giselle's ears. Inside, the Augustines team had transformed a section of the catering kitchen into an extension of their restaurant. Equipment was arranged in the exact configuration they were accustomed to, mise en place, organized with military precision. Olivia looked up as Giselle entered, nodding in acknowledgement. "Just in time, we're testing the plating sequence now." For the next hour, they refined the assembly process, ensuring each plate would be consistent and that the team could maintain the necessary pace. The first guests would be seated at 4, with service beginning at 5:30. Everything had to be timed perfectly. Nicholas arrived at 3, surveying their preparations with a critical eye. He made minor adjustments to the plating design, then gathered the team for final instructions. "Tonight isn't just about feeding people," he reminded them. "It's about creating an experience that honors both the cause we're supporting and the reputation we've built. Each plate that leaves our station tells a story about our values, our craft, and our respect for our guests." As he spoke, Giselle felt a surge of pride in being part of this team, this tradition. The months of training, the countless hours of practice, the burns and cuts and exhaustion, all of it had led to this moment of shared purpose. The service itself was a blur of focused activity. Giselle worked the garnish position, adding the final touches to each plate before it was whisked away by servers. From this vantage point, she could occasionally glimpse the dining room, where Chicago's elite sat at elegantly decorated tables beneath crystal chandeliers and flower arrangements. Midway through service, Nicholas appeared at her side. "The governor's table is next," he murmured. "He specifically asked who created this dish. I told him you'd deliver it personally." Giselle's eyes widened in alarm. "Me, but I'm not—" "You're exactly who should present this dish," Nicholas interrupted firmly. "It's your creation. Own it." Before she could protest further, she found herself being ushered toward the pass, where 6 perfect plates awaited. A server in formal attire stood ready to guide her to the governor's table. Taking a deep breath, Giselle smoothed her chef's jacket, a new one Nicholas had presented her with that morning, with her name embroidered on the breast pocket, and followed the server into the dining room. The governor's table fell silent as she approached. 6 expectant faces turned toward her as she and the server placed the plates before them. "Good evening," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm Giselle from Augustine's. Tonight we've prepared for you a heritage braised beef, inspired by traditional home cooking but elevated with classical technique. The short ribs are braised for 12 hours in red wine and aromatics, served with a sweet corn puree, charred summer vegetables, and a fresh herb gremolata." The governor, a silver-haired man with kind eyes, smiled at her. "This looks remarkable." "And how long have you been with Augustine's?" 7 months, sir," Giselle replied truthfully. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "And already creating signature dishes? You must be quite talented." Giselle thought of her journey, from cooking over a tin can to standing here in a pristine chef's jacket. I've had extraordinary teachers, she said simply, both in the kitchen and in life. As she returned to her station, she caught Nicholas watching her, approval evident in his expression. The rest of the service proceeded flawlessly, and by 9 o'clock the last plates had been served. The team began the meticulous process of breaking down their stations and packing equipment for return to Augustine's. "You did well today, Olivia," told Giselle as they worked side by side. "With the dish and with the governor, Nicholas was right about you." Coming from Olivia, this was extraordinary praise. Giselle smiled, too tired for words but filled with satisfaction. Later, as the Augustine's team gathered for a celebratory toast before departing, Nicholas raised his glass to Giselle. "To our youngest chef, who reminded us all today that great cuisine can come from the humblest beginnings." The heritage braised. Beef was the hit of the evening. As glasses clinked around her, Giselle felt a strange sense of dissonance. Just that morning she had been cheering at a children's baseball game. Now she stood among Chicago's culinary elite, being celebrated as one of their own. The two worlds seemed impossibly distant, yet here she was, straddling both. What would happen, she wondered, when those worlds inevitably collided? The answer came sooner than expected. 2 weeks after the gala, a feature article appeared in the Chicago Tribune's food section. Titled "Augustine's Secret Weapon, The Child Prodigy Redefining Fine Dining," it told Giselle's story in sensationalized detail: her family's homelessness, her makeshift cooking over a tin can, Nicholas's discovery of her talent, and her rapid rise within one of Chicago's most prestigious kitchens. The article included a photograph of Giselle in her chef's whites, looking impossibly young despite her serious expression. The reporter had somehow obtained quotes from her school teachers, neighbors in their former building, and even distant relatives who had had no contact with the family in years. Nancy was furious. "They had no right to expose our private struggles. Like this," she fumed, pacing their small living room after reading the article. "To turn our hardship into some kind of inspirational poverty porn." Giselle sat quietly on the couch, still processing the strange experience of seeing her life story in print, twisted into a narrative she barely recognized. Yes, the basic facts were accurate, but the tone, presenting her as some kind of culinary Cinderella, felt exploitative and incomplete. "I'm sorry, Mum," she said finally. "I never spoke to any reporters. I don't know how they got all this information." Nancy softened, sitting beside her daughter. "It's not your fault, honey. It's just—" She sighed deeply. "We were starting to move past all that, build something new. Now everyone will know us as that homeless family." The article's impact extended beyond their home. At school, which had just begun its fall term, Giselle found herself the subject of uncomfortable attention. Some students who had previously ignored her now approached with awkward curiosity. Others whispered behind her back. Teachers regarded her with a mixture of pride and concern, as if unsure whether to celebrate her success or worry about her. Unusual circumstances. Even at Augustine's, the article created ripples. Regular customers began requesting the young chef's specials. Food tourists appeared, hoping to catch a glimpse of the tin can prodigy. Some staff members who had finally begun treating Giselle as just another member of the team now seemed resentful of her sudden celebrity. Nicholas called her into his office the day after the article appeared. "I owe you an apology," he said, without preamble. "The reporter contacted us about doing a piece on the restaurant. I had no idea she would focus so intensely on your personal history or publish those details without consent." Giselle nodded, appreciating his directness. "What do we do now?" "We have several options," Nicholas replied. "We can issue a statement, requesting privacy. We can embrace the attention and channel it toward positive ends. Or we can simply continue as we have been, letting the story fade naturally as the news cycle moves on." He leaned forward. "The choice is yours, Giselle. This is your life, your story. How do you want to handle it?" The question caught her off guard. Throughout her young life, circumstances had largely dictated her choices. Survival had been the priority, not self-determination. To be suddenly granted agency over her own narrative felt both empowering and overwhelming. "I need time to think," she said finally, "and to talk with my family." "Take all the time you need," Nicholas assured her. "But know this, whatever you decide, you have a place here, not as a symbol or a story, but as a chef with genuine talent." That evening, Giselle sat down with her mother and siblings for a family council, something they had done during their hardest times when important decisions needed to be made collectively. "The article changed things," Giselle began. "People see us differently now, see me differently." "They're just jealous," Harley declared loyally, "because you're famous now." Hope was more reflective. "Is it bad that people know about before, when we didn't have a home?" It was the question at the heart of their discomfort, the shame. That society attached to homelessness, to poverty, to struggling in a system designed to hide such struggles from view. Nancy looked at each of her children in turn, her expression fierce with maternal protection. "Listen to me, all of you. What happened to us was not our fault. We faced circumstances that could happen to anyone. Illness, job loss, an unfair economy. We survived because we stayed together, because we took care of each other. There is no shame in that, none." Her words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity and truth. "So what do we do about the article?" Giselle asked. "Nicholas says I can choose how to respond." Nancy considered this. "What do you want, Giselle? Not what you think we want, or what Nicholas wants, or what would be best for Augustine's. What do you want?" It was a profound question, one that forced Giselle to look beyond the immediate situation to the future she envisioned for herself. Did she want to be known primarily as the girl who cooked with a tin can? Or did she want to be recognized for what she could create, what she could contribute to the culinary world? "I want to cook," she said finally. "Not to be a story, but to tell stories through food, to honor where I came from without being defined by it." Nancy nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then that's what you should tell Nicholas." The next day, Giselle arrived at Augustine's early, before the usual prep team. She found Nicholas already in his office, reviewing invoices. "I've made my decision," she announced without preamble. Nicholas set aside his paperwork, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." "I don't want to hide from my past," Giselle began, the words coming more easily than she had expected. "But I don't want it to be a gimmick either. If people are interested in my story, I want it to highlight something bigger, about food insecurity, about opportunities for kids like me." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. "That's a mature perspective." "I was thinking," Giselle continued, an idea that had formed during her sleepless night taking shape, "what if we started a program, something that teaches cooking skills to kids from difficult backgrounds, not necessarily to become chefs, but to give them tools for self-sufficiency, creativity, maybe even a career path?" A slow smile spread across Nicholas's face. "A culinary mentorship program," he mused, "using Augustine's resources and connections to create opportunities. It's an excellent idea." "It would give meaning to what happened," Giselle explained. "Make it about more than just me." Nicholas studied her for a moment, pride evident in his expression. "You continue to surprise me, Giselle. Most people in your position would either hide from the attention or exploit it for personal gain. You're looking for a way to channel it toward helping others." Giselle shrugged, slightly embarrassed by his praise. "It's what you did for me," she pointed out. "You could have just given me money or called social services. Instead, you gave me a chance to learn to build something lasting." Over the following weeks, Nicholas and Giselle developed the framework for what would become the Foundation's culinary program. Augustine's would provide space, equipment, and instructor time. Local food suppliers, many already partnered with the restaurant, agreed to donate ingredients. A social service agency would help identify participants who might benefit most from the program. The announcement of the initiative generated positive press that overshadowed the earlier article, reframing Giselle's story as one of inspiration rather than exploitation. The first cohort of 8 students, ranging in age from 9 to 16, all from challenging backgrounds, began meeting twice weekly in Augustine's kitchen during off hours. Watching these children discover the joy of creating something with their own hands, Giselle recognized her younger self in their initially tentative movements, their growing confidence, their pride in what they produced. She wasn't their primary instructor. That role fell to rotating Augustine's staff members, including Olivia, who revealed a surprising talent for patient teaching, but she served as living proof that their circumstances didn't determine their potential. As autumn deepened toward winter, Giselle found herself approaching a state of balance she hadn't thought possible. School during the day, Augustine's in the evenings, family time secured through clearly communicated boundaries, and the Foundations program on weekend mornings. It was a full life, demanding but fulfilling. Then came the letter that would change everything once again. The envelope bore an official-looking seal and was addressed to Giselle Martin, C.O. Augustine's Restaurant. Inside was an invitation. That seemed impossible. The James Beard Foundation was hosting a special Rising Stars dinner in New York, featuring promising young culinary talents from across the country. Giselle had been selected as one of 5 participants. The event would require her to leave Chicago for a week to work alongside renowned chefs in an unfamiliar kitchen to create a signature dish representing her culinary perspective for some of the most discerning palates in the country. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was also terrifying. Giselle sat in Augustine's empty dining room after the lunch service, staring at the invitation as if it might disappear if she looked away. That's where Nicholas found her, lost in thought. Considering whether to accept, he asked, taking the seat across from her. She nodded. It's such an honor, but you're wondering if you're ready, Nicholas finished for her. If you can compete at that level. Yes, Giselle admitted, and it would mean missing school, leaving my family. Nicholas was quiet for a moment. Do you remember your first night here? How overwhelmed you were by all the equipment, the terminology, the pace? Giselle smiled at the memory. I was sure I'd never keep up. Yet here you are, 7 months later, running stations, creating dishes, teaching others. Nicholas leaned forward. The question isn't whether you're ready for New York, Giselle. It's whether New York is ready for you. His confidence was heartening, but Giselle still hesitated. What would I even cook? It needs to be something that represents me, my journey. That's something only you can answer, Nicholas replied. But perhaps start by asking yourself, what flavors bring you comfort? What techniques speak to your experience? What story do you want to tell through this dish? As the day of decision approached, Giselle experimented with various concepts in Augustine's kitchen during off hours. Nicholas had given her free rein to use equipment and ingredients, asking only that she document what she used for inventory purposes. She began with complicated constructions, technically impressive dishes that showcased the skills she'd learned at Augustine's. But each attempt felt hollow, disconnected from her true culinary voice. One evening, frustrated after another disappointing test, Giselle found herself drawn to the alley behind the restaurant. The night was cold, reminiscent of those desperate months when she'd cooked over her makeshift tin can stove. On impulse, she gathered some bricks from a pile of landscaping materials, found an empty metal container, and built a small fire using kitchen scraps. It was there, crouched beside the tiny flame, that inspiration finally came. The next day, she presented her concept to Nicholas. Tin can transformation, a dish that would begin tableside with a humble porridge cooked over a miniature open flame, then transform before the guest's eyes into a sophisticated creation that honored those same elemental flavors, but elevated them through technique and presentation. Nicholas listened, eyes bright with interest. It's honest, he said when she finished, authentic, a perfect bridge between where you began and where you're going. He smiled. I think you found your signature dish. With the concept decided, practical arrangements needed to be made. Nancy took time off work to accompany Giselle to New York, while the twins would stay with a trusted neighbor. Augustine's granted Giselle a week's paid leave and covered travel expenses for both her and her mother. Giselle's teachers provided assignments she could complete during downtime. The night before their departure, Augustine's held a special staff dinner in Giselle's honor. Even on her first day, she hadn't felt as nervous as she did standing before. The assembled team, chefs, servers, dishwashers, managers, all raising glasses in her direction. "To Giselle," Nicholas toasted. "May you show New York what Chicago already knows, that extraordinary talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that true cuisine speaks not just to the palate, but to the heart." Olivia, typically reserved with praise, added her own words. "Remember your training, trust your instincts, make us proud." As applause filled the dining room, Giselle felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for the opportunity, anxiety about the challenge ahead, pride in how far she had come, and a quiet determination to honor the journey that had brought her to this moment. What awaited her in New York would test everything she had learned, not just about cooking, but about herself. Yet as she looked around at the faces of those who had become her second family, she knew with sudden clarity that, regardless of the outcome, she was already successful in the ways that truly mattered. The transformation from a girl cooking over a tin can to a chef representing her restaurant on a national stage wasn't just about culinary skill. It was about finding her voice, claiming her place in the world, and discovering that the same hands that had once struggled for survival could now create experiences of beauty and meaning for others. Will Giselle's unique approach captivate the sophisticated palates of the James Beard judges? How will this national recognition change her path forward? And can she truly balance her rapidly accelerating culinary career with the needs of the family she has always prioritized? New York City unfolded before Giselle like a different planet, taller, louder, and more frenetic than Chicago. The taxi. Ride from LaGuardia Airport to their hotel in Manhattan was a sensory bombardment of honking horns, towering buildings, and surging crowds. Beside her, Nancy gazed out the window with a mixture of wonder and apprehension, one hand firmly holding Giselle's as if to anchor them both amid the unfamiliar chaos. Their accommodations, arranged by the James Beard Foundation, were more luxurious than any place they had ever stayed. The boutique hotel near Union Square featured plush bedding, marble bathrooms, and windows that framed stunning city views. When the bellhop showed them to their room, Giselle and Nancy exchanged glances that communicated a shared thought. How far we've come from that abandoned building. They had arrived a day before the official events began, allowing time to settle in and explore. Walking through Union Square Green Market the next morning, Giselle found herself instinctively assessing the produce, noting regional differences and seasonal offerings. Nancy watched with amusement as her daughter engaged farmers in detailed discussions about growing methods and flavor profiles. "You really are a chef now," she remarked as they continued their exploration. "Sometimes I still see my little girl, but then you start talking about acid balance and mouthfeel, and I glimpse this whole other person you're becoming." Giselle considered this. "I'm still me," she said finally. "Just more, I guess. Like I found pieces of myself I didn't know were missing." That afternoon, they reported to the James Beard House in Greenwich Village, a brownstone that had once been home to the legendary chef and food writer. Inside, the Warren-like structure housed offices, event spaces, and most importantly, a professional kitchen where the rising star's dinner would be prepared. Izumi Takahashi, the foundation's events coordinator, greeted them warmly. "Giselle, we're so pleased you could join us. You're the youngest rising star we've ever featured." "Thank you for including me," Giselle replied, conscious of representing not just herself but Augustine's and Nicholas's legacy. "The other chefs are already getting acquainted in the kitchen," Izumi continued. "Why don't I introduce you while your mother gets settled in our guest lounge?" With a reassuring nod from Nancy, Giselle followed Izumi through the historic house to its surprisingly modern kitchen. 4 young chefs were gathered around a central island, deep in conversation. They fell silent as Giselle entered, their expressions registering surprise at her apparent youth. "Everyone, this is Giselle Martin from Augustine's in Chicago," Izumi announced. "Giselle, meet your fellow rising stars. David from Lumiere in Boston, Patricia from Seed in Portland, Marcus from Ember in Atlanta, and Javier from Terroir in San Francisco." Handshakes were exchanged, polite welcomes offered. The others ranged in age from early 20s to mid-30s, all significantly older than Giselle. Their credentials were impressive: culinary school pedigrees, apprenticeships with famous chefs' positions at acclaimed restaurants. "So you're the wunderkind we've been hearing about," David said, his tone friendly but tinged with skepticism. "The tin can chef." Giselle felt her cheeks warm. The nickname, derived from the media coverage of her story, made her culinary journey sound like a gimmick rather than a genuine path. "I prefer just Giselle," she replied evenly. Patricia, sensing her discomfort, changed the subject. "We were just discussing our concepts for the dinner. Care to share yours?" As Giselle outlined her tin can transformation idea, she watched their expressions shift from polite interest to genuine curiosity. The concept was undeniably original, more narrative-driven than the modern, technique-focused dishes the others described. "That's actually brilliant," Marcus acknowledged when she finished. "Using the story as an integral part of the experience, rather than just a biographical footnote." "Thanks," Giselle said, relieved by the positive reception. "What about your dishes?" The conversation flowed more easily after that, each chef describing their culinary philosophy and planned contribution to the dinner. Despite their varied backgrounds, they shared a common language of technique, flavor, and passion for their craft. By the time they broke for the evening, Giselle felt a tentative connection with these peers who, just hours before, had seemed intimidatingly accomplished. The next 3 days were devoted to preparation and practice. Each chef was assigned kitchen space, equipment, and a foundation staff member to assist with procurement and logistics. The dinner would feature 5 courses, one from each rising star, served to 60 influential guests from the culinary world, media, and foundation supporters. Giselle worked methodically, refining each element of her dish. The base porridge, reminiscent of what she had once made for her siblings, was enhanced with heritage grains and subtle aromatics. The tableside transformation would incorporate techniques she'd mastered at Augustine's, a reduction made from roasted bones, vegetables turned translucent through careful compression, herbs transformed into vibrant oils. The final presentation would honor both her humble beginnings and her culinary growth. On the second day of preparations, she encountered an unexpected challenge. The miniature cooking stations she had envisioned for the tableside element, small, contained versions of her original tin can setup, were deemed a fire safety violation by the venue. "Open flames at each table simply aren't possible," Izumi explained apologetically. "Insurance won't allow it." Giselle felt her carefully constructed concept crumbling. The visual and aromatic experience of the small cooking fires was central to the emotional impact of her dish. Without it, the narrative thread would be broken. She retreated to a quiet corner of the kitchen, fighting disappointment. The other chefs, absorbed in their own preparations, didn't notice her distress, except for Javier, who approached after observing her from his station. "Problem?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. Giselle explained the situation, expecting perhaps sympathy but little else. Instead, Javier's expression became thoughtful. "What if we use induction?" he suggested. "Invisible heat, no flames, but still cooking happening at the table. Then for the aromatics," he trailed off, thinking. "Smoking elements under glass domes, released when the transformation occurs?" It was an elegant solution, one that preserved the conceptual integrity of her dish while addressing the practical constraints. Together they approached Izumi with the revised plan, which received immediate approval. "That was brilliant," Giselle told Javier afterward. "Thank you." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Cooking is problem-solving. We all face constraints. Ingredients not available, equipment malfunctions, last-minute changes. Adaptability is as important as technique." It was a lesson Nicholas had often emphasized, but hearing it from a peer in this high-pressure environment reinforced its significance. As they returned to their stations, Giselle felt a new sense of camaraderie with her fellow rising stars. They might have different backgrounds and styles, but they shared common challenges and a unified purpose to create memorable experiences through food. The evening before the dinner, the foundation hosted a casual reception for the featured chefs and key attendees. Giselle, dressed in a simple black dress borrowed from one of Olivia's nieces, felt out of place among the sophisticated crowd. Nancy, equally uncomfortable in her best outfit, stayed close by, a protective presence amid the unfamiliar socializing. There she is, our youngest rising star. A tall woman with striking silver hair approached them, hand extended. I'm Elaine Masterson, president of the foundation. I'm so pleased you could join us, Giselle. Thank you for the invitation, Giselle replied, shaking her hand. It's an honor to be included. The honor is ours, Elaine assured her. Your story has captured attention, of course, but it's your talent that earned you this spot. Nicholas speaks very highly of your potential. You know Nicholas? Giselle asked, surprised. Elaine smiled. We go back decades. He was on our first Rising Stars panel, years before Augustine's opened. That's why I was particularly intrigued when he contacted me about you. This was news to Giselle. She had assumed her invitation had come through the media coverage or the gala event. The revelation that Nicholas had specifically recommended her added another layer of responsibility to represent not just herself, but his judgment and mentorship. As the evening progressed, Giselle found herself circulating among culinary luminaries, celebrated chefs, influential critics, cookbook authors whose works lined Augustine's office shelves. Many expressed genuine interest in her unusual path to professional cooking, asking thoughtful questions about her experiences and perspective. One conversation particularly stood out. Henri Berger, an iconic French chef whose 3 Michelin-starred restaurants spanned 3 continents, sought her out specifically. I was intrigued by your biography, he said in his thick accent. It reminded me of my own beginnings cooking with my grandmother over a wood fire in rural France. No electricity, no running water, just ingredients, heat, and hands. Giselle, who had studied Berger's cookbooks with reverence, was startled by this connection. I didn't know that about you, she admitted. It's not in my official story, he confided with a wink. Publicists prefer tales of formal apprenticeships with famous masters, but the truth, my first and most important teacher, was necessity. He leaned closer. Never be ashamed of your unconventional education, young chef. It gives you insights others lack. His words stayed with Giselle as she prepared for bed that night, mind racing despite physical exhaustion. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of months of preparation, anxiety, and growth. As she drifted towards sleep, her thoughts returned to that alley in Chicago, to the tin can nestled between bricks, to the faces of her siblings waiting for nourishment. From that first desperate act of love had grown something unexpected, a vocation, a language, a future. Whatever happened at tomorrow's dinner, that truth remained unchanged. Morning brought organized chaos to the James Beard House kitchen. The 5 rising stars moved with focused intensity, each absorbed in their final preparations. Support staff ferried ingredients, polished glassware, and transformed the dining spaces. The camaraderie of previous days gave way to the necessary isolation of concentration. Giselle's station was meticulously organized, each component of her dish prepped and ready. The induction units for tableside service had been tested. The custom-made serving vessels, shallow bowls that would transform during the course of the presentation, awaited their contents. As service time approached, Izumi gathered the chefs for final instructions and a moment of collective centering. Tonight isn't a competition, she reminded them. It's a celebration of diverse voices in American cuisine. Trust yourselves. Trust your food and remember why you cook. Giselle closed her eyes briefly, picturing her siblings, her mother, Nicholas, and the Augustine's team. Then she opened them and nodded, ready. The dinner unfolded in a blur of focused action. Patricia's vibrant vegetable mosaic opened the meal, followed by Marcus's reimagined Southern classics. Giselle's dish would be third, the pivotal middle position. As her moment approached, she moved to the plating area where assistants waited to help execute her vision. First, the base porridge was spooned into the custom bowls, its aroma deliberately humble and nostalgic. Then came the tableside elements, carefully arranged on trays to be carried to each table. From the dining room doorway, Giselle watched as her dish was served. At each table, the server placed the simple porridge before the guest, followed by the induction unit and components for transformation. A brief narrative introduced Giselle's story and concept, inviting the diners to witness the evolution from necessity to artistry. Then, as planned, transformation unfolded. The hum of induction elements, the sizzle of reductions, the release of aromatic steam from glass domes. Simple became complex, humble became elevated, yet the essential flavors, the soul of the original, remained recognizable beneath the refinement. Giselle held her breath as the first reactions registered on diners' faces. Surprise gave way to appreciation, and then, most gratifying of all, to emotion. At one table, an older woman discreetly wiped a tear. At another, animated conversation erupted as the final element was added. When Giselle returned to the kitchen, her fellow rising stars greeted her with nods of respect and quiet congratulations before returning to their own preparations. Javier gave her a thumbs up from his station. Patricia mouthed, "Beautiful," as she passed. The remainder of the dinner proceeded smoothly, with David's innovative seafood course and Javier's desert finale completing the culinary journey. When all courses had been served, the 5 chefs were invited into the dining room to meet the guests. They were greeted with enthusiastic applause, each receiving acknowledgement for their unique contribution to the evening's experience. Elaine Masterson stepped forward to address the gathering. Tonight we've witnessed the future of American cuisine. Diverse, innovative, personal, and profound. These 5 chefs represent different backgrounds, techniques, and philosophies, yet each speaks authentically through food. This is what the Rising Stars program celebrates, not just technical skill, but the unique voices that will shape our culinary landscape. As the formal portion of the evening concluded, guests circulated to speak with the chefs individually. Giselle found herself surrounded by curious attendees, many expressing how moved they had been by the narrative journey of her dish. "It was like tasting your biography," one woman told her. "I've never experienced anything quite like it." A prominent restaurant critic asked detailed questions about her technique, clearly impressed by the sophistication underlying the seemingly simple presentation. The juxtaposition of rustic elements with precise modern methods was masterfully handled, he noted, particularly coming from someone with your limited formal training. Henri Berger returned, bringing with him a stern-looking man whom he introduced as Jean-Claude Mercier, executive chef at his New York restaurant. "Jean-Claude didn't believe me when I said the most interesting chef here would be the youngest," Berger explained with a twinkle in his eye. "Now he owes me dinner." Mercier grudgingly acknowledged the excellence of Giselle's concept and execution. "If you ever wish to stage at our kitchen during school holidays," he offered, "there would be a place for you." It was the kind of opportunity aspiring chefs might wait years to receive, yet Giselle found herself hesitating. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I'd need to discuss it with my family and with Nicholas." Mercier raised an eyebrow, then nodded with unexpected approval. Loyalty, good. Too rare in young chefs today. As the evening drew to a close, Giselle sought out her mother, who had watched the entire proceedings with quiet pride. "How did I do?" she asked, suddenly just a daughter seeking maternal reassurance. Nancy embraced her, eyes shining. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "Not just the food, but how you handled yourself, with grace, humility, and confidence." They returned to their hotel room emotionally and physically exhausted, but buoyed by the evening's success. As Giselle prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a message from Nicholas. Heard from several attendees, they were moved and impressed. "As am I. Rest well, chef. We'll celebrate properly when you return." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to her eyes. Chef. Not student, not apprentice, not prodigy. Chef. The remainder of their time in New York passed in a whirlwind of follow-up events, media interviews, and moments of sightseeing squeezed between professional obligations. The Rising Stars dinner had generated significant buzz in culinary circles, with each chef receiving attention for their distinctive contributions. For Giselle, the experience was both exhilarating and disorienting. Restaurant owners approached her with job offers, executive positions that would require relocating, abandoning school, transforming her life completely. Wealthy private clients inquired about personal chef services. A publishing agent suggested a cookbook focusing on her unique journey and approach to food. Through it all, she maintained a centered perspective, promising only to consider options after consulting her family and mentors. The most intriguing proposition came not from the glamorous restaurant world, but from a non-profit organization focused on food justice and education. "We'd like to expand your foundation's program nationally," explained the director, Maya Santos, "using your story and methodology to create cooking programs for underserved communities across the country. It would involve some travel for training and promotion, but you could remain based in Chicago." This resonated with Giselle in a way the more prestigious offers hadn't. It would allow her to continue her education, both academic and culinary, while extending the impact of her experience to others in similar circumstances. On their final night in New York, Giselle and Nancy shared a quiet dinner at a small, neighborhood restaurant near their hotel. Away from the spotlight and expectations of the culinary elite, they reflected on the whirlwind week and its implications. "So many opportunities," Nancy mused, stirring her coffee. "More than I could have imagined when I found you cooking over that tin can." Giselle nodded, thoughtful. "It's overwhelming. Most of them would mean big changes for all of us." "What does your heart tell you?" Nancy asked. "Not what looks most impressive or pays the most, but what feels right for you, for who you are and who you want to become." It was a profound question, one that cut through the noise of external validation and professional advancement to the core of Giselle's identity and purpose. She considered it carefully, thinking not just of the past week but of the entire journey that had brought her to this moment. "I want to keep learning," she said finally, "at Augustine's, at school, from everything around me. I'm not ready to be the final authority in a kitchen. I have so much more to discover, but I also want to share what I've learned to make it mean something beyond just my success." Nancy reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "That sounds like the Giselle I know, always balancing giving and growing." "The foundation's expansion might be the right path for now," Giselle continued. "It would let me stay with our family, continue at Augustine's, finish school, but also reach more kids who might not otherwise get a chance." "Like Nicholas did for you," Nancy observed. "Exactly," Giselle agreed, "completing the circle." As they prepared to return to Chicago the next day, Giselle felt a clarity that had eluded her throughout the excitement of the Rising Stars experience. The validation from the culinary establishment was gratifying, but it wasn't the measure of her worth or the guidepost for her future. Those came from within, from the values forged during hardship, nurtured by family love and reinforced by mentors who saw beyond technique to character. Nicholas met them at O'Hare Airport, a surprising gesture that indicated the significance he placed on Giselle's achievement. On the drive back to the city, she shared the various opportunities that had emerged from the dinner, saving the foundation's expansion for last. "What do you think?" she asked when she'd finished, valuing his perspective even as she grew more certain of her own inclinations. Nicholas was quiet for a moment, navigating through traffic before responding. "I think you've been presented with 2 paths," he said carefully. "One leads toward personal advancement, prestigious positions, acclaim, financial success. The other leads toward meaningful impact, education, opportunity creation, system change." "And which would you choose?" Giselle pressed. Nicholas smiled. "I chose both at different times. Early in my career, I pursued excellence and recognition single-mindedly. It brought success, but at significant personal cost. Later, I found that sharing my knowledge, creating opportunities for others like you, brought deeper satisfaction." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "The beautiful thing about your situation, Giselle, is that you don't have to choose permanently at 11 years old. You can pursue impact now, through the foundation's expansion, while continuing your education and development at Augustine's. The other opportunities will still exist when you're ready for them." His wisdom affirmed her instinctive direction, providing the final confirmation she needed. Over the following weeks, a plan took shape. Giselle would continue her regular schedule at Augustine's, with additional time allocated for developing the National Foundations program. She would travel occasionally during school breaks to train instructors and promote the initiative, with Nancy accompanying her on longer trips. Augustine's kitchen became the test kitchen for the expanded curriculum, with Giselle working alongside Maya Santos to adapt the program for different age groups, cultural contexts, and resource limitations. Nicholas provided not just space, but strategic guidance, drawing on his extensive network to secure funding and partnerships. Olivia, to everyone's surprise, became deeply invested in the project, volunteering her limited free time to develop advanced modules for older participants, showing particular promise. "Someone needs to ensure technical standards are maintained," she insisted when questioned about her involvement. But those who knew her best recognized that beneath her demanding exterior lay a genuine desire to create pathways for talented young people regardless of their circumstances. The twins, now thriving in their stable school environment, took pride in their sister's increasing recognition. Harley particularly enjoyed sharing newspaper clippings about Giselle with his friends and teachers. Hope, more introspective, began showing interest in cooking herself, often asking Giselle to teach her simple techniques on family nights. As winter gave way to spring, and the foundation's expansion moved from planning to implementation, Giselle found herself living a life more balanced and purposeful than she could have imagined during those desperate days cooking over a tin can. The hardship that had forced her to discover her talent had been transformed into an engine for positive change, not just for herself and her family, but for others facing similar challenges. 1 year to the day after Nicholas had first discovered her in that Chicago alley, Augustine's hosted a special dinner to celebrate both Giselle's journey and the successful launch of the National Foundations program. The event brought together supporters, participants, and media, featuring a collaborative menu created by Foundation students working alongside Augustine's chefs. During a quiet moment before service began, Nicholas found Giselle in the kitchen, observing as a 13-year-old Foundations participant carefully plated an appetizer she had designed. "Proud of what you've built?" he asked softly. Giselle watched as the young chef in training adjusted a garnish with focused precision, her face reflecting the same mixture of concentration and joy that Giselle had discovered in herself. "It's not what I've built," she replied. "It's what we're building together, something that will last beyond any single dish or dinner." Nicholas nodded, understanding the depth of her insight. "The true essence of cooking has never been about feeding ourselves," he said. "It's about nourishing others, body and soul." As they moved toward the dining room to welcome their guests, Giselle reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From survival to self-expression, from necessity to artistry, from receiving help to extending it to others, each step had been essential to becoming not just the chef, but the person she was growing into. The tin can that had once been her only cooking vessel now sat on a shelf in Nicholas's office, a humble reminder of beginnings and possibilities. What mattered wasn't where you started, Giselle had learned, but how you transformed whatever ingredients life provided into something meaningful, generous, and true. And that was a recipe worth sharing with the world. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.